right, hello and welcome everybody. It's Doug here with the LincolnList.com. I want to welcome you back to another episode of Happy Hour. This is number 16. Can you believe it? Already 16 of these. And I want to thank you guys for your support, your comments, and I'll even thank you for your criticism. Now we got a good one here for today. We're going to taste test our first bourbon. I'm pretty sure this is the first bourbon that we've taste tested. Correct me if I'm wrong. We're going to talk about stocks because I think we're going to see some pretty big changes coming up. And I'm going to do a little psychological trader talk here, how to get you from the amateur level to the pro level. So it's going to be pretty good. Let's get right into it because this kind of week here so far, I'd like to have a drink. I want to start this off with a drink. And our guest today will be Bulleit Bourbon, Frontier Whiskey from the frontiers of Kentucky. I don't know if there's any frontiers in Kentucky. Always seems like when it comes to whiskey, cowboys, whiskeys, frontiers, all that stuff seems to go synonymous with bourbons or whiskeys in general. Now, I'm not much of a bourbon fan, but that doesn't mean anything. Not anything at all. You may love bourbon and hate scotch. That's fine. Whatever you like is good. But the question that gets asked a lot is, what is the differences between bourbon and scotch? Now, there's quite a few, but if it's just a table topic and somebody was to ask you outright, well, what's the main difference? The main difference is where the whiskey is distilled. If you remember a couple of these past that we did, we talked about the whiskey regions and how the flavors of the flavor of scotch is indigenous to the area in which it's distilled, like the Isleys, Campbellton, Highlands, Lowlands, and such. Really, the main difference is, Scottish whiskey is scotch, made in Scotland, and American whiskey is bourbon. Now, there's a couple of other differences. The next one would be that most scotches are distilled with barley, and bourbons would be corn. So a small difference there, but it makes a big taste overall. It makes a big taste difference overall once it's done being distilled. Now, this Bulleit Bourbon, I used to think it was Bulleit because it's spelled like I-E-T. And the first time I ever drank this, I was with the legendary Kunal himself from Bulls on Wall Street. He came to San Diego. I'm at a restaurant, and I said, "Give me some of that Bulleit Bourbon," like I was all fancy and stuff. And then the guy's looking at me. He's like, I said, "The Bulleit in the cup over there with this on it." He says, "Oh, you mean Bulleit Bourbon?" I'm like, "Yeah, I meant Bulleit Bourbon." So anyway, cheers to you there. I'm going to drink this here. Let me have a sip first. It's a pretty smooth bourbon. As I said, most bourbons are smooth. They don't sting nearly as bad as the scotches. I think this one here, this would run you for a regular size bottle would be about 25 to 30 bucks. So it's a budget priced, clean, smooth whiskey. Now also some people ask about Jack Daniels when it comes to bourbon. And is it bourbon or not? Well, it is. It is a bourbon, but they claim to coal filter it or something like that, and it's made in Tennessee, so therefore it's Tennessee whiskey. So you can kind of see that whiskeys are like gangs, like the Crips and the Bloods, or like the person from the South Side or from my hood, right? Everybody wants to represent their area with their types of whiskeys. I mean, that's really what it is. It's pretentious. Some people are silly about it, but whiskey has its own unique flavors depending on where it's distilled. So again, the main differences between bourbons and scotch is where they're distilled and the fact that scotches use barley and this uses corn. So those little subtle changes make a difference. Now let's talk about the history of this fine American whiskey. According to their website here, I'm going to read it because there's no way I was going to memorize it. This started in 1830 by Augustus Bulleit. I called him Bulleit. Bulleit would be his name. Anyway, Augustus Bulleit. And he spent, according to the website, his entire life mastering this art of whiskey. He wanted to make the perfect bourbon. And he devoted, according to the website, devoted his whole life to this wonderful whiskey. And he finally has this recipe. So he was on his way to New Orleans here. It says, one fateful day while transporting his barrels of bourbon from Kentucky to New Orleans, Augustus Bulleit vanished. He just vanished. Just vanished. I don't know what he was in, probably like a horse and buggy. So he's cruising his way from like, Kentucky to New Orleans, maybe with a horse and a whole bunch of barrels like Wells Fargo, yeah. And he vanishes. It's gone. Like no remnants of Augustus Bulleit. He's gone, and his recipe was thought to be lost forever. Somehow, which we don't have a story for, his family figures out the recipe. They find it somehow. Again, we don't have a story for this. And then they re-distill this, creating what we know in the late 1800s as Bulleit Bourbon. That's a pretty good story, huh? So I guess old Augustus Bulleit, back in the 1800s, spent his whole life making this very bourbon that's in this cup. And he wanted to spread this bourbon to the world. So he gets on a horse with a buggy full of bourbons. And he's just chilling on his way to New Orleans, like, oh, I'm going to go to New Orleans and get drunk with all these people. Yeah, ooh. And he's gone. He just vanishes. Now, maybe there was a bunch of drunk Indians that got bourbon. Like Indians got him or something and stole all his bourbon. That'd be a good heist. Good heist to get back in a couple hundred barrels of bourbon. So then he vanishes. He's just gone. Nobody knows whatever happened to Augustus. But his family pulls through and delivers us this wonderful, tasty, amazing $25 bottle of Kentucky bourbon, Frontier whiskey. Pretty good. So anyway, we'll move on. According to the site, it says, what do we have here? Let's see. I was trying to find. All right, tasting notes. I actually have tasting notes for this. I didn't even bother to smell it before I drank it. Medium amber in color, I guess so, with gentle spiciness and sweet oak aromas. Mid-palate is smooth with tones of maple, oak, and nutmeg. The finish is long, dry, and filled with a light toffee flavor. And maybe some spice. Maybe another drink. It's a little bit sweet. So not too bad. If you like bourbon, I've had a few bourbons, Maker's Mark, a couple of others. Maker's Mark is all that came to my mind. This is not too bad. They also make a rye version for those that like rye. So anyway, Bulleit Bourbon, pretty good. Nice little libation. This is a interim cheer to our good friend Augustus Bulleit, who vanished somewhere on the way to New Orleans with all this whiskey, but his family came through so we all can enjoy this great libation. All right, so let's move on. Speaking of the differences between Scotch and whiskey, obviously you can tell just from the outside, it's not much difference. It's only maybe one ingredient or two ingredients that change the whole complexion of the taste between bourbon and a Scotch. And this brings me to my talk about trading. Often people will ask me, what is the difference between an amateur or a pro? Or the question that comes by more is, was there an aha moment for you, or when did you know in your trading career back here at Loserville, when did you know that you were going to be a professional? Was there a light bulb that went off? Was there a trade that happened? Was there an aha moment where you're like, oh? And the answer to all of that is no. For me, I can only speak for myself, but I would say that most traders would say the same thing. You really don't have those kind of moments. It's sort of a gradual progression from doing this and seeing a certain result, and then it slowly gets better, and it gets a little better and better and better, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh wow, I'm actually finally making money at this. And my point is, what really separates amateurs from the pro, and I got pros, and I'm going to back up for a second because I actually did an article, a post not too long ago. If I somehow can remember it, I'll put the link down. But when I started out and I was really struggling, I used to think that there was a special indicator, or there was like a secret society like the Skulls or the Illuminati who were like, we're all pro traders and we have this little secret and we're not sharing it with you. And, you know, I bought system after system where people would sell you and say, hey, look, I figured this out. I'm a prodigy, whatever the sales pitch is. But I used to think there was a secret ingredient. Like there was going to be this one thing that was going to change it all the way around. In fact, it was nothing like that. All that it really was, now that I look back, was taking the things that you already knew and just changing them slightly. So like you can see the difference between Scotch and bourbon is just one little ingredient. So sometimes the difference between success and failure is just one small change that you make. It doesn't have to be big, epic change. It can be small, just something small, just maybe cleaning up your trades, maybe being a little bit more disciplined, maybe cutting losses just a little too soon. And I've made this kind of reference before. If you don't believe me, if you could go back every month, if you could go back to the last month you had a trading, if you could remove the one large loss from your account, if they would just give you like a mulligan on it and say, all right, we're taking it off, we're giving you the money back, what kind of difference would your P&L look like? If you could take that one bunk trade out of your portfolio, what would it look like? And I mean, that's the way it is with business and life and everything. I mean, the difference between success and failure is razor thin. Like if you look at sporting events, you know, any sporting event, whether it's football, hockey, basketball, racing, it makes no difference. The difference between the top teams and the bottom teams is not very much. You know, it may seem like a lot because maybe a team doesn't win any games or they lose all the time, but most of the time they lose, it's only by a few points. You know, maybe it's a basket or a field goal or a goal or two. So that difference between being in first place, being a champion, and being an absolute loser at the very bottom, for them is razor thin. It's just a couple of points. It's one play here or there throughout the game. The difference between you as a trader, between your amateur career and your professional career, is also razor thin. It's the one or two things that you're going to do differently. The changes that you're going to make, the subtle changes that you're going to make to help you get to that next level. So for me, and I would imagine it would be the same for you, and if you are doing well, you would probably agree if you're struggling, do it, is that your changes don't have to be huge. You don't have to throw out everything and start from scratch. You need to start with the very things that are hurting you the most. You know, you look at something, and this may take a lot longer than I have time to explain, but it's a step-by-step process. What I like to do is each and every week I try to look back at the previous week or previous couple weeks and say, you know what I'm struggling with now? I'm struggling with entries. I'm struggling with being patient. I'm struggling with forcing trades. I'm struggling with exiting trades. I'm struggling with managing my trades. And then I will pick that. So let's say, for example, I'm really getting pissy about my entries. Then I'll spend the whole week and I'll say, my only goal this week is to focus on every entry that I make and try to do a better job. Try to be a little bit more patient and try to get a better entry. And then you just slowly work from there. And then when you fix that, you say, okay, well, I'm having a management problem. I'm getting out of trades too soon. I'm getting stopped out. Take a moment and just correct it. You don't have to say my strategy sucks, it doesn't work, I'm a loser, and that's it. I want to quit trading and jump off of a bridge and drink some Bulleit Bourbon. You just need to make small changes. So my point is, just as the difference between Scotch and bourbon is very minuscule, but yet in the end, the taste is impactful. The difference between winning and losing, little subtle changes, will make a big difference to your overall results by the time you're done. So, how about we talk about some stocks, right? Let's get into some stock talk. Okay, let's take a good look here at the market, and I'm not sure why, because this market hasn't done anything since the beginning of December. We got the post-election rampola. We made new highs, but I'm going to open this up just a little bit more. There was a little bit of selling right towards the end of the year. It could be tax loss selling, tax, whatever. But you know, since this year, it hasn't done anything. You look here for the last 2 weeks, really since the beginning. It's just been trending right along 226.5, give or take, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Now, I don't know if this was a stall prior to the inauguration. Like, you had the impact of the election. Then you had the rally after that. And then now it's like, okay, well, let's wait and see what happens after the inauguration, executive orders, or whatever it may be. Bottom line is, I really don't care. What I'm finding annoying here is the fact that we're getting zero ranges on stocks. Yes, you can make money, but one of the things I've talked about a lot in the past was a trader, you shouldn't have to struggle to find opportunity. If you have to struggle to find opportunity, you're trying too hard to make something happen, and that's usually a recipe for disaster. So it's been kind of slow. It's something you have to deal with from here or there, but it couldn't end soon enough as far as I'm concerned. I'd like to get back to a little bit more action and volatility. So now that the inauguration is over, as I'm doing this, as we approach Monday, maybe we start to see some decisions being made. So it basically looks like from the outside, which I can't guarantee, but it looks like, after the market ramp, everyone sat on their hands and they've just been sitting on their hands for the entire month. So we'll see how this thing plays out. If you're looking for bearish scenarios, I wouldn't think about that until you got down to around 225s, down to the lower parts of 225s. And if we start, perking up around the 227s and a half, then that Dow 20K stuff is going to start coming back. It's kind of been put on ice here for the last couple of weeks, but we're like 45 days into promises of Dow 20K. So that talk will probably gear back up. So if you see 227s and a half there, and you see it stay up there, then you're probably going to hear that talk again, and maybe you get another little push. Now, I want to start looking at this. I don't want to start looking. I have been looking. I have this Swix as my top short play going into Monday. I got burned on. I didn't get really burned. I lost some money on this thing on Friday, like $800 or something like that. It really kind of like took away all the profits I had for the day. It was a good entry. I'm looking back at it and I'm trying to figure out what could I have done different. And the answer is not much, because I get short on a really good vert here. It wasn't a big position, and I added a little bit to it, and it just kind of stopped. And this is something that's kind of been going across the board is it's rare when you see a stock just ramp up $10 with a really steep RSI and high overbought conditions, and it doesn't give you at least, a stock that goes $10. And when you're short, you're looking at 50, 60 cents, maybe $1 for a piece of profit. This thing barely pulled back at all, like at all. It was maybe 20 cents, it seemed like. I'm exaggerating, of course. And it was just one of those stocks that was just really stubborn, and it just kind of flagged around here, up there towards the highs, and it was one of those things. So pretty much, it stayed high the whole day. I don't know where it's going to head there, but I'd like to see, of course, a little bit more. I'm thinking now maybe 92s if it can get vertical the next day. I doubt on day 2 you see these vertical like this. You might, but it's probably something that you won't. But let's look for that. I'm going to look for that and see if maybe there's some kind of setup. Now, AVGO here is a pretty bullish stock that looks like it's going to sniff out $200 here really soon. There's two different kind of trades I'm looking at this point with this AVGO. And that would be if there's a pullback to start the day, a flush or some sort of, like this right here, like a pullback or just some sort of drift, and then a base. I wouldn't be opposed to actually longing this stock for a nice little breakout. Now, maybe if it starts out early and it goes sideways for a little bit, and you can get in pre-190, 140s, 50s or something like that, it breaks out. It could go. You could get a nice little run there. That would be one trade, is to go long that way. The flip side to that is if it turns around and pulls a number like this and really gets steep first thing Monday, then I would be more inclined to short it. And that, again, that's not because I think it's garbage. It's just the fact that you got a stock here that's gone in just a couple of days from 171, is it 180, 180, all the way up here to 190 in just a couple of days. You can see how tall these candles are, pretty steep. So if you're going to just instantly start out Monday at 195, 196, then that's exactly what I would look for at that point. Another one here is this. I've been talking about this one a lot here on the Twitster and the stock twits. is this dang Clovis. This thing, there's a spike. You know, when you're looking at the overall chart here, it definitely looks overbought on the daily. But intraday, this thing has a spike every day. I mean, this is just the last couple of days up top. But you go back and you look as far, quite a bit of distance. It always has a spike. This thing it always starts to sell and then spikes. Like here is Thursday's action with this big vertical. And then here today, it starts out the selling on Friday and then comes right back up. Point is, this thing is a dip buy until it's just no longer a dip buy. I mean, this thing has been rolling now. It's been a solid dip buy since Thanksgiving. I mean, every dip has been bought. It has never really drifted that much, and it has never followed through with its selling. It's not like maybe the standard technical setup, but it's a stock that's very predictable. And if you just pick it up on the dips here and there, you're going to get 40, 50 cents out of clip over and over and over again. It's non-dramatic. It's a smooth, easy, non-stress trade, and it doesn't really drop that far. So this Clovis is a good trader. I wish I traded it a lot more rather than 2 to 3 times. I should be traded 20 to 30 times because of the way that it works. And last here, good old URI. It's got some earnings coming up this week, and it's something I want to look at closely because. Since the election, this was a $70 stock. Now, 111 and still going. And you're coming up here and it's like, I don't know what you got going on for earnings. But I'll be interested. It's always something I am interested in. I don't play earnings in general. But, I do try to look at stocks that have significant run-ups with lots of hype going into earnings because the pressure's been put on them. There's so much pressure there for them to perform well and do good. So if they miss one thing out of the earnings, the stock usually gets hammered. And it's a pretty nice kind of trade. So I'm going to be watching this. I won't trade it through earnings, but I'll be looking at it the day after. If I did trade it through earnings, I would use an option contract where you could really keep your risk at a limited level that you could stomach. But again, to me, earnings are 50-50. And I think that's going to do it for my stock talk there. That's pretty good right there. A couple of nice looking plays. And hopefully now that the inauguration is over, we can start to see a little bit of action here. All right, everyone, I want to thank you very much for enjoying this happy hour number 16 with me. Enjoying a little bit of the Bulleit Bourbon. I would rate this as pretty good. It's pretty decent. In the worlds of bourbons, if you like it, give it a shot. I've also had the rye before. I might have mentioned that in the beginning, and the rye is not too bad. So it's nice and smooth. If you like the bourbons, give the Bulleit a shot. Until the next happy hour, I want to wish you success in your trading. And as I always say, if you need some help, make sure you visit thelincolnlist.com, take a free trial to the trading room. And remember, the very most important thing of this whole entire rant today was that little changes. Pick one thing every week that you want to work on. One thing that will make you better. And just take your trading slow, one step at a time. And trust me, you'll get to the success zone a lot faster. So that's going to do it. Let's just raise our glasses and cheer to the legendary Augustus Bulleit and his trip from Kentucky to New Orleans and this recipe resurrected from the depths of hell by the Bulleit family. Because now we get to enjoy it here in good old 2017. Until next time, cheers.